No Guyana, officially the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, is a country on the northern mainland of South America. Guyana is an indigenous word which means land of many waters. The capital city is Georgetown. Guyana is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean to the north, Brazil to the south and southwest, Venezuela to the west, and Suriname to the east. With 215,000 square kilometers, 83,000 square miles, Guyana is the third smallest sovereign state by area in mainland South America after Uruguay and Suriname, and is the second least populous sovereign state in South America after Suriname. It is also one of the least densely populated countries on Earth. It has a wide variety of natural habitats and very high biodiversity. The region known as the Guyanas consists of the large shield landmass north of the Amazon River and east of the Orinoco River, known as the Land of Many Waters. 9 indigenous tribes reside in Guyana: the Wayway, Makushi, Patamona, Lokano, Kalina, Wapishana, Pemen, Akawayo, and Warao. Historically dominated by the Lokano and Kalina tribes, Guyana was colonized by the Dutch before coming under British control in the late 18th century. It was governed as British Guyana, with a mostly plantation-style economy until the 1950s. It gained independence in 1966, and officially became a republic within the Commonwealth of Nations in 1970. The legacy of British rule is reflected in the country's political administration and diverse population, which includes Indian, African, Indigenous, Chinese, Portuguese, other European, and various multiracial groups. In 2017, 41% of the population of Guyana lived below the poverty line. Guyana is the only South American nation in which English is the official language. However, the majority of the population speak Guyanese Creole, an English-based Creole language, as a first language. Guyana is part of the Anglophone Caribbean. It is part of the mainland Caribbean region, maintaining strong cultural, historical, and political ties with other Caribbean countries, as well as serving as the headquarters for the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. In 2008, the country joined the Union of South American Nations as a founding member. The name Guyana derives from Guyana, the original name for the region that included Guyana, British Guyana, Suriname, Dutch Guyana, French Guyana, and the Guayana region in Venezuela, Spanish Guyana, and Amapá in Brazil, Portuguese Guyana. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, Guyana comes from an indigenous Amerindian language and means land of many waters. The Cooperative Republic of Guyana in the official name referred to cooperative socialism. 9 indigenous tribes reside in Guyana: the Wayway, Makushi, Patamona, Lokano, Kalina, Wapishana, Pemen, Akawayo, and Warao. Historically, the Lokano and Kalina tribes dominated Guyana. Although Christopher Columbus was the first European to sight Guyana during his third voyage, in 1498, and Sir Walter Raleigh wrote an account in 1596, the Dutch were the first Europeans to establish colonies: Pomeroon, 1581, Essequibo, 1616, Berbice, 1627, and Demerara, 1752. After the British assumed control in 1796, the Dutch formally ceded the area in 1814. In 1831, the United Colonies of Demerara, Essequibo, and separate colony of Berbice together became a single British colony known as British Guyana. Since its independence in 1824, Venezuela has claimed the area of land to the west of the Essequibo River. Simon Bolivar wrote to the British government warning against the Berbice and Demerara settlers settling on land which the Venezuelans, as assumed heirs of Spanish claims on the area dating to the 16th century, claimed was theirs. In 1899, an international tribunal ruled that the land belonged to Great Britain. The British territorial claim stemmed from Dutch involvement and colonization of the area, also dating to the 16th century, which was ceded to the British. Guyana achieved independence from the United Kingdom as a dominion on May 26, 1966, and became a republic on February 23, 1970, remaining a member of the Commonwealth. Shortly after independence, Venezuela began to take diplomatic, economic, and military action against Guyana in order to enforce its territorial claim to the Guayana Essequibo. The U.S. State Department and the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, along with the British government, also played a strong role in influencing political control in Guyana during this time. The American government supported Forbes Burnham during the early years of independence because Chetty Jagan was identified as a Marxist. They provided secret financial support and political campaign advice to Burnham's People's National Congress, to the detriment of the Jagan-led People's Progressive Party, which was mostly supported by Guyanese of Indian background. Guyana was elected twice as member of the UN Security Council in 1975–76 and later 1982–83. In 1978, a total of 918 people died at the Jonestown mass murder-suicide led by cult leader Jim Jones. In May 2008, President Bharat Jagdeo was a signatory to the UNASUR Constitutive Treaty of the Union of South American Nations. The Guyanese government officially ratified the treaty in 2010. In March 2020, President David A. Granger narrowly lost the snap elections, following Granger's government loss of a vote of no confidence back in 2018. Granger refused to accept the results, but eventually 5 months later, Irfan Ali of the People's Progressive Party/Civic was sworn in as the new president because of allegations of fraud and irregularities. The territory controlled by Guyana lies between latitudes 1 and 9N, and longitudes 56 and 62W. It is one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. The country can be divided into 5 natural regions: a narrow and fertile marshy plain along the Atlantic coast, low coastal plain, where most of the population lives, a white sand belt further inland, hilly sand and clay region, containing most of Guyana's mineral deposits, the dense rainforests, forested highland region, in the southern part of the country, the drier savanna areas in the southwest, and the smallest interior lowlands, interior savanna, consisting mostly of mountains that gradually rise to the Brazilian border. Some of Guyana's highest mountains are Mount Iyanguna, 2,042 m or 6,699 feet, Monte Cabaret, 1,465 m or 4,806 feet, and Mount Roraima, 2,772 m or 9,094 feet, the highest mountain in Guyana, on the Brazil-Guyana-Venezuela tripointment border, part of the Pacaraima Range. Mount Roraima and Guyana's tabletop mountains, Tipuas, are said to have been the inspiration for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel The Lost World. There are also many volcanic escarpments and waterfalls, including Kayatur Falls, which is believed to be the largest single-drop waterfall in the world by volume. North of the Rupununi River lies the Rupununi Savannah, south of which lie the Kanuku Mountains. The 4 longest rivers are the Essequibo at 1,010 kilometers 628 miles long, the Corentyne River at 724 kilometers 450 miles, the Berbice at 595 kilometers 370 miles, and the Demerara at 346 kilometers 215 miles. The Corentyne River forms the border with Suriname. At the mouth of the Essequibo are several large islands, including the 145 kilometers 90 miles wide Shell Beach along the northwest coast, which is also a major breeding area for sea turtles, mainly leatherbacks, and other wildlife. The climate is tropical and generally hot and humid, though moderated by northeast trade winds along the coast. There are 2 rainy seasons, the first from May to mid-August, the second from mid-November to mid-January. Guyana has one of the largest unspoiled rainforests in South America, some parts of which are almost inaccessible by humans. The rich natural history of Guyana was described by early explorers Sir Walter Raleigh and Charles Waterton, and later by naturalists Sir David Attenborough and Gerald Durrell. In 2008, the BBC broadcast a 3-part program called Lost Land of the Jaguar, which highlighted the huge diversity of wildlife, including undiscovered species and rare species such as the giant otter and harpy eagle. In 2012, Guyana received a $45 million reward from Norway for its rainforest protection efforts. This stems from a 2009 agreement between the nations for a total of $250 million for protecting and maintaining the natural habitat. Thus far, the country has received $115 million of the total grant. Biodiversity and conservation. Guyana is home to more than 900 species of birds, 225 species of mammals, 880 species of reptiles, and more than 6,500 different species of plants. Among these wildlife categories, the most notably famous are the arapaima, which is the world's largest scaled freshwater fish, the Giant anteater, the largest anteater, the giant otter, the world's largest and rarest river otter, and the kaka of the rock, Rupicola rupicola. The following habitats have been categorized for Guyana: coastal, marine, littoral, estuarine palustrine, mangrove, riverine, lacustrine, swamp, savanna, white sand forest, brown sand forest, montane, cloud forest, moist lowland, and dry evergreen scrub. Forests, NBAP, 1999. About 14 areas of biological interest have been identified as possible hotspots for a national protected area system. More than 80% of Guyana is still covered by forests, which also contain the world's rarest orchids, ranging from dry evergreen and seasonal forests to montane and lowland evergreen rainforests. These forests are home to more than 1,000 species of trees. Guyana's tropical climate, unique geology, and relatively undisturbed ecosystems support extensive areas of species-rich rainforests and natural habitats with high levels of endemism. There are about 8,000 species of plants in Guyana, half of which are found nowhere else. Guyana has one of the highest levels of biodiversity in the world. With 1,168 vertebrate species and 814 bird species, it boasts one of the richest mammalian fauna assemblages of any comparably sized area in the world. Guyana is home to 6 ecoregions: Guianan Highlands moist forests, Guianan moist forests, Orinoco Delta swamp forests, Tipuis, Guianan savanna, and Guianan mangroves. The Guyana Shield region is little known and extremely rich biologically. Unlike other areas of South America, over 70% of the natural habitat remains pristine. Guyana ranks third in the world with a 2019 Forest Landscape Integrity Index mean score of 9.58/10. The rich natural history of British Guyana was described by early explorers Sir Walter Raleigh and Charles Waterton, and later by naturalists Sir David Attenborough and Gerald Durrell. Southern Guyana is host to some of the most pristine expanses of evergreen forests in the northern part of South America. Most of the forests found are tall, evergreen hillland, and lower montane forests, with large expanses of flooded forest along major rivers. Thanks to the very low human population density of the area, most of these forests are still intact. The Smithsonian Institution has identified nearly 2,700 species of plants from this region, representing 239 distinct families, and there are certainly additional species still to be recorded. The diversity of plants supports diverse animal life, recently documented by a biological survey organized by Conservation International. The reportedly clean, unpolluted waters of the Essequibo watershed support a remarkable diversity of fish and aquatic invertebrates, and are home to giant otters, capybaras, and several species of caimans. On land, large mammals, such as jaguars, tapirs, bush dogs, giant anteaters, and saki monkeys are still common. Over 400 species of birds have been reported from the region, and the reptile and amphibian faunas are similarly rich. In February 2004, the government of Guyana issued a title to more than 4,000 square kilometers, 1,106 acres, of land in the Conashen Indigenous District as the Conashen Community-Owned Conservation Area, managed by the Weiwei, and the world's largest community-owned conservation area. The Iwa-Krema International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development was also created for the protection and sustainable use of the Iwa-Krema forest area. The Guyanese economy rebounded slightly and exhibited moderate economic growth after 1999, due to expansion in the agricultural and mining sectors, a more favorable atmosphere for business initiatives, a more realistic exchange rate, fairly low inflation, and the continued support of international organizations. Guyana held huge amounts of debt which have been written off through various international agencies. In 2003, Guyana qualified for $329 million of debt relief, in addition to the $256 million from the original World Bank plan for assisting heavily indebted poor countries in 1999. The Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative in 2006/7 wrote off about $611 million of Guyana's debt by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank. In 2006, Japan finalized its bilateral debt cancellation agreement. In 2007, $15 million was written off by China, and in 2008, Venezuela cancelled $12.5 million. In 2008, the economy witnessed a 3% increase in growth amid the global economic crisis. It grew 5.4% in 2011 and 3.7% in 2012. IMF projected economic growth to be 53% in 2020 following the completion of the first offshore oil project. Actual growth in GDP in 2020 was 43%, reports in April. 2021 anticipate 20% growth for 2021. The government initiated a major overhaul of the tax code in early 2007. A value-added tax, VAT, replaced 6 different taxes. Prior to the implementation of the VAT, it had been relatively easy to evade sales tax, and many businesses were in violation of tax code. Many businesses opposed VAT introduction because of the extra paperwork required. However, the government has remained firm on the VAT, replacing several taxes with one flat tax rate. It will also be easier for government auditors to spot embezzlement. This was prevalent under the former PPP/C government, who authorized the VAT to be equal to 50% of the value of the good. Major private sector organizations include the Private Sector Commission, PSC, and the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, GCCI. The chief majority, about 90%, of Guyana's 744,000 population lives along a narrow coastal strip which ranges from a width of 16 to 64 kilometers, 10 to 40 miles, inland, and which makes up approximately only 10% of the nation's total land area. The present population of Guyana is racially and ethnically heterogeneous, with ethnic groups originating from India, Africa, Europe, and China, as well as indigenous or aboriginal peoples. Despite their diverse ethnic backgrounds, these groups share 2 common languages, English and Guyanese English Creole. The largest ethnic group is the Indo-Guyanese, also known as East Indians, the descendants of indentured laborers from India who make up 43.5% of the population, according to the 2002 census. They are followed by the Afro-Guyanese, the descendants of slaves imported from Africa, who constitute 30.2%. The Guyanese of mixed heritage make up 16.7%, while the indigenous peoples, known locally as Amerindians, make up 9.1%. The indigenous groups include the Arawaks, the Wayway, the Caribs, the Akawayo, the Aracuna, the Podhamona, the Wapizana, the Makashi, and the Warao. The 2 largest groups, the Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese, have experienced some racial tension. Most Indo-Guyanese are descended from indentured laborers who migrated from North India, especially the Bhojpur and Awadh regions of the Hindi belt in the present-day states of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Jharkhand. A significant minority of Indo-Guyanese are also descended from indentured migrants who came from the South Indian states of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. These South Indian descendants are the plurality ancestry in the East Berbice-Corentyne region. English is the official language of Guyana and is used for education, government, media, and services. The vast majority of the population speaks Guyanese Creole, an English-based Creole with slight African, Indian, and Amerindian influences, as their native tongue. Indigenous Caribbean languages, Akawayo, Wayway, and Makashi, are spoken by a small minority of Amerindians. Guyanese Hindustani is spoken by the older generation of the Indo-Guyanese community, but younger Guyanese use English or Guyanese Creole. In 2012, the population was 63% Christian, 25% Hindu, 7% Muslim. Religion is an important aspect of identity in Guyana and reflects the various external influences of colonialism and immigrant groups. Christianity was considered the prestigious religion, transmitting European culture and representing upward mobility in the colonial society. Missionaries and churches built schools, and until nationalization in the 1970s, nearly all schools were denominational. When Indians were brought to the country as indentured labor, Hinduism and Islam gained prominence, but for some decades neither were acknowledged for legal marriage. Some traditional African and Amerindian folk beliefs remain alongside the dominant religions. The politics of Guyana takes place in a framework of a parliamentary representative democratic republic, in which the president of Guyana is both head of state and head of government, and of a multi-party system. Executive power is exercised by the president and the government. Legislative power is vested in both the president and the National Assembly of Guyana. Historically, Politics are a source of tension in the country, and violent riots have often broken out during elections. During the 1970s and 1980s, the political landscape was dominated by the People's National Congress. In 1992, the first constitutional elections were overseen by former United States President Jimmy Carter, and the People's Progressive Party led the country until 2015. The two parties are principally organized along ethnic lines and as a result often clash on issues related to the allocation of resources. In the general elections held on November 28, 2011, the People's Progressive Party, PPP, retained a majority, and their presidential candidate Donald Raimoter was elected as president. On May 11, 2015, early general elections were held. A coalition of the A Partnership for National Unity Alliance for Change, APNUAFC, parties won 33 of the 65 seats in the National Assembly. On May 16, 2015, retired Army General David A. Granger became the 8th President of Guyana. However, on December 21, 2018, a vote of confidence was called for, regarding terms under which the government granted a franchise for offshore oil exploration. Legislator Sharain Das-Persad defected from the coalition and the vote failed, requiring new elections. The governing coalition litigated this result for the entire 90 days allowed for new elections. New elections were held on March 2, 2020, and results were declared on August 3, 2020, with the People's Progressive Party/Civic as the winner. Mohamed Irfan Ali became the 9th President of Guyana. Public procurement in Guyana is overseen by the Public Procurement Commission, appointed under the Public Procurement Commission Act 2003. Due to lengthy delay in identifying and agreeing commission members, the commission was not appointed until 2016. Military. The Guyana Defense Force, GDF, is the military service of Guyana. Human rights. Homosexual acts are illegal in Guyana. It is currently the only country in South America that prohibits such acts. Engaging in such acts can warrant life imprisonment, though the prohibition is not enforced. These laws can be difficult to alter, as Guyana's constitution protects laws inherited from the British Empire from constitutional review. However, cross-dressing has been legal since 2018, when a ban was struck down by Guyana's Court of Last Resort, the Caribbean Court of Justice. President David A. Granger, 2015 to 2020, expressed support for these efforts. Information Exchange Agreement, Clause 3, which was signed on July 22, 1992 in Georgetown, Guyana, intending to exchange tax information on an automatic basis. There are a total of 187 kilometers 116 miles of railway, all dedicated to ore transport. There are 7,969 kilometers 4,952 miles of highway, of which 591 kilometers 367 miles are paved. Navigable waterways extend 1,077 kilometers 669 miles, including the Berbice, Demerara, and Essequibo rivers. There are ports at Georgetown, Port Kaituma, and New Amsterdam. There are two international airports, Chedijugun International Airport, Taimuri, and Eugene F. Carrera International Airport, formerly Ogle Airport, along with about 90 airstrips, 9 of which have paved runways. Guyana, Suriname, and the Falkland Islands are the only 3 regions in South America that drive on the left. Electricity. The electricity sector in Guyana is dominated by Guyana Power and Light, GPL, the state-owned vertically integrated utility. Although the country has a large potential for hydroelectric and bagasse-fueled power generation, most of its 226 MW of installed capacity correspond to diesel engine-driven generators. Several initiatives are in place to improve energy access in the hinterland. Life expectancy at birth is estimated to be 69.5 years as of 2020. The PAHO/WHO Global Health Report 2014, using statistics of 2012, ranked the country as having the highest suicide rate in the world, with a mortality rate of 44.2 per 100,000 inhabitants. According to 2011 estimates from the WHO, HIV prevalence is 1.2% of the teen/adult population, ages 15 to 49. Education in Guyana was primarily introduced and operated by missionizing Christian denominations. The wealthy planter elite often sent their children for education abroad in England, but as schools improved in Guyana, they also modeled after the former British education system. Primary education became compulsory in 1876, although the need for children to assist in agricultural labor kept many children from schooling. In the 1960s, the government took over control of all schools in the country. Fees were removed, new schools were opened in rural areas, and the University of Guyana was established so students no longer were required to go abroad for tertiary education. Guyana's literacy was one of the highest in the Caribbean, by estimated literacy rate of 96% in 1990. In a 2014 UNESCO estimate, literacy is 96.7 in the 15 to 24-year-old age group. However, the functional literacy may be only as high as 70%. Students are expected to take the NGSA, National Grade 6 assessment, for entrance into high school in grade 7. They take the CXC at the end of high school. Schools have introduced the CAPE exams, which all other Caribbean countries have introduced. The A-level system, inherited from the British era, is offered only in a few schools. Infrastructure challenges impact access to education, especially students in the hinterland. A World Bank assessment showed roughly 50% of teachers were untrained, operated with inadequate teaching materials, and served children of parents with low levels of adult literacy. Guyana's culture is very similar to that of the English-speaking Caribbean, and has historically been tied to the English-speaking Caribbean as part of the British Empire when it became a possession in the 19th century. Guyanese culture developed as forced and voluntary immigrants adapted and converged with the dominant British culture. Slavery eradicated much of the distinction between differing African cultures, encouraging the adoption of Christianity and the values of British colonists, which laid the foundations of today's Afro-Guyanese culture. Arriving later and under somewhat more favorable circumstances, Indian immigrants were subjected to less assimilation, and preserved more aspects of Indian culture, such as religion, cuisine, music, festivals, and clothing. Guyana's geographical location, its sparsely populated rainforest regions, and its substantial Amerindian population differentiate it from English-speaking Caribbean countries. Its blend of the two dominant Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese cultures gives it similarities to Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname, and distinguishes it from other parts of the Americas. Guyana shares similar interests with the islands in the West Indies, such as food, festive events, music, sports, etc. Events include Mashramani, Mash, Fagua, Holi, and Deepavali, Diwali. The major sports in Guyana are cricket. Guyana is part of the West Indies cricket team for international cricket purposes, basketball, football, and volleyball. Minor sports include softball cricket, beach cricket, field hockey, netball, rounders, lawn tennis, table tennis, boxing, squash, rugby, horse racing, and a few others. Guyana played host to international cricket matches as part of the 2007 Cricket World Cup, CWC 2007. The new 15,000-seat Providence Stadium, also referred to as Guyana National Stadium, was built in time for the World Cup and was ready for the beginning of play on March 28. At the first international game of CWC 2007 at the stadium, Lizith Malinga of the Sri Lankan team took 4 wickets in 4 consecutive deliveries. Guyana's national basketball team has traditionally been one of the top contenders at the Caribe Basket, the top international basketball tournament for countries in the Caribbean. For international football purposes, Guyana is part of CONCACAF. The highest league in their club system is the GFF Elite League. Guyana's national football team has never qualified for the FIFA World Cup, however they qualified for the Caribbean Cup in 1991, finishing 4th, and 2007. In 2019, they qualified for the CONCACAF Gold Cup for the first time, after finishing 7th in the qualifiers. They finished 3rd in Group D, having lost 2 matches and drawn 1. Guyana also has 5 courses for horse racing. Guyana featured a beach volleyball